started my professorial duty in Frankfurt on Monday night, actually. I'm the film class professor. It's very serious. And one of the things I said to one of the students was that, you know, I was a very diligent student, and I did my life drawing class, and I did my stained glass window class, and I did my mural painting class. The only class that I really got deliberately ill enough not to be able to attend was the video class. I always hated it. I knew what I liked, and what I liked was film. And there was something very primal in that for me, in that I don't really like information to be shot straight into my eye. I always preferred the idea that you were getting it in some kind of a third-hand way. You have the celluloid, a light passes through, it hits a screen, and then your eye gets it. And there's something softer, even if you're watching a very hard series of images with difficult ideas. I think there's a softer landing. It's very telling that technocrats and technicians have been pushing video to be as close to film as possible. Therefore, film is still on that pedestal. When I started looking at films in a certain way and doing almost nothing to them except representing the way that they would be seen or could be seen, that definitely is coming from the kind of intellectual rigor that I had through my studies in London. But I think the choices of the films that I work on were probably coming from this much more autobiographical exercise. Let's take, for example, Hitchcock's Psycho and Taxi Driver, for instance. I didn't see Psycho, I think, until I was about 21. And I didn't see Taxi Driver until I was about 26 or 27. I mean, there was a lot to do with the old experience of cinema as well, and the fact that there was something happening, I think, in the 1980s, in Britain at least, that cinema was going down and TV and the VCR was coming up. And, you know, my experience of film was definitely much more in the domestic situation rather than the communal cinematic or cathedral of cinema, which I like to think about sometimes. And then when I got into it and I, you know, hit the French New Wave, and, you know, one of the most important books, I think it's one of the best books on cinema ever, is the interviews between Hitchcock and Truffaut. And that was a kind of a turning point, I think, for me, when I realized that there were different types of cinema. They could be deconstructed, and you could openly seduce people at the same time as being slightly intellectual. One of my students actually in Frankfurt said to me, when was the last time you went to the cinema? And I had to kind of lie and say, I never go to the cinema for moral reasons. But the last time I was in the cinema was to see my work. The last time I was in the cinema before that was to see my work. The last time I was in the cinema before that was to see my work. And that just sounds like such a load of wank. To a student, it's not really, you know, sometimes it's better not to tell the truth. When I started to work with the material, and I mean the material would be a videotape, and you know, like an innocent person, I did take out a videotape and held it up, and there's nothing to see, and that's magical as well. It appears to be nothing, but it contains all this information of a different, you know, I suppose it's the early idea of the avatar in a way, that the cinema screen has all these characters behind. And I think with 24-hour cycle, when I installed that in Glasgow for the first time in 1993, I wanted to put the screen in the middle of the space, so when you went behind it, you just saw it, the same thing from the other side, but from the other side. So that's where I started to get interested in the mirror image. I went from there into hospital archives and started to dig around for images which looked magical because they were shot by, you know, cinematographers, even although they were done apparently for medical purposes. It became kind of obvious that I was going to have to get behind the camera one day. Rather than stand in front of the mirror, I had to take another step back and be behind the camera and behind the lens, also in front of a mirror. It's such a perfect day. I'm glad I spent it with you. Oh, such a perfect day. You just keep me. You know, I knew I had to start making films. And actually the first film that I made was called feature film. Maybe I wasn't confident enough to think that I would make anything other than that. So I had this kind of very teenage, vain idea that in my life I always wanted to write a short novel, make a record, and make a feature film. So at least I got the feature film done. And having done that, which was a study of a conductor with an orchestra, the orchestra I'd never seen, so how would you know that he would be a conductor? And the orchestra are playing the score to Hitchcock's Vertigo. And when we showed that, some people who saw it had asked me questions like, how many little images did you slip in from Vertigo? Because they really think that they saw James Stewart or Kim Novak in my film, and it never happened. But the cinematic experience and the music obviously was powerful enough that images were coming from inside of their head and they were projecting their images onto my film. And I thought that that's an incredibly sophisticated and perverse thing to happen. After making feature film, and I was quite confident by that time then about working in the industry. So the premise for Zidan was, what if we make a feature film which is a portrait, and why not make it around a football player? And of course, when we went to see Zidan, it became three questions. What if, why not? And Zidan said, why me? And we said to him, no one really knows what aftershave you wear. We don't know if you go out to nightclubs. You exist from the first kick of the ball until the final whistle. And that's what's incredibly special about you as a player. He represents something which is exclusively him, completely chimeric, so he becomes everyone else. The day before the match, that's when our crew started to arrive. And you can imagine 17 or 18 cameras, each camera having an operator, a focus puller, a loader and a runner. I think the crew was about 150 or something like that. The pressure was on. And still the producers were saying to us, you have to make a storyboard, and we said we can't, it's a live event. And they said, but you have to be able to say something to the operators about what it is that you want. So Philippe and I kind of had a little chat. The collection of portraits in the Prado is probably one of the best in the world. So we took our camera guys there on the morning of the game, and they opened up the doors to the Prado, and we walked in through the Goya entrance, and you have this vast corridor of portrait after portrait after portrait, and we said to the film guys, to the operators, this is our storyboard. Look down the corridor and imagine that every painting is a film still. And as we're walking past, please look carefully at every still that you're seeing. Now, we are shooting at 24 frames a second, but we want all of the information that you're seeing from this Goya, which probably took about a year to paint. We want a year's worth in everything. So we obviously set the bar pretty high, and it was astonishing. These guys who look at people and look at events as their daily bread had never seen anything quite like that. One of the most beautiful memories that I have is standing in front of these two paintings of the Duchess of Alba, I think it is. Both by Goya. Same woman lying on a chaise. One, she has her clothes on. One, she is not wearing clothes. But the angle of observation is slightly different. And Philippe and I were saying, we don't really know how to explain what's going on here, but look at the dynamic between the two pictures. It's a phenomenon. So, we got the most expensive storyboard in the history of film done because we used the Prado. I don't think that anybody that I really respect thinks of themselves in any world. The best chefs that I know are always involved in something else. The best filmmakers are always involved in something else. The best singers are always doing something else. I think you can be hermetic, but within your little hermit cave or whatever, I think it's important that you have something else happening somewhere else in the world. One of the best comments that a teacher ever made to our class in Glasgow was, you're here for 4 years, don't feel that you have to leave and be an artist. Just enjoy this 4 years that you have here, because you'll never have this amount of freedom again. And, as a little lotus eater that I am, I wanted to perpetuate that 4 years for as long as possible. So that's why I don't really have a huge engagement with what's perceived to be the art market or the art world or the film world or anything else. People will always put you in a pigeonhole. Why would you fly in on your own?